Hello guys, this is FK, and sometime this year, a very popular bank, that's GT Bank, released their mobile app, and this is a mobile app that has like over 5 million downloads, and it was buggy. It was so buggy, people could not even log in. Like, people could not even log in. You wake up, your app, they set your app to auto update. The app's updated, and people could not even log in. And a lot of people, including myself, had to go through this entire biometric system. This was an app that was working the previous day. I had to go through this entire biometric steps to log in into our bank app. And because of that, we couldn't do a lot of transactions. And I remember it took like 2 weeks for me to get into the app. 2 whole weeks.
How long is this going to take?
It got so bad that they had to take this app down from the App Store, fix it, and update it with a better version. That was when things started working very well. People could not use their mobile application, which they depend on every day, for weeks. That's how bad making a bad deployment can be. Yeah, that when you make a bad deployment, when you have a bad deployment strategy, that's how bad things can get. And it got that bad for an application that is being used by over 5 million people. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you different deployment strategies so that you can know the best deployment strategy for your application based on how critical your application is to users. We're going to be going through the deployment strategies, and we're going to be breaking them down into what the strategy is all about, what are the risks involved, also what the type of situations where the type of the deployment strategy we're talking about is suitable. What type of situations do you make use of this particular deployment strategy over this particular deployment strategy? That's what we're going to be doing in this video. So if you're interested in that, let's get started. So the first type of deployment strategy we're going to be looking at is the basic deployment. This is the straightforward deployment, often called the big bang deployment, and you might guess why later. Now, this deployment is when there's a complete swipe out of the old version for the new version. Yeah, you just roll off the old version and you deploy the new version. That was what GT Bank did for their app. And the strategy is that this deployment is thoroughly planned, and a lot of times users will be informed, yeah, there's going to be a downtime between this period and that period. They mostly pick a time where they know that most people are not going to be using their app, probably like 3 a.m. at the midnight. So they often, you probably have gotten one of those emails before where they tell you, oh, this app is going to have a downtime between so time and so time, so try and plan your usage. Because at that point, this type of deployment, there will be a downtime because they are going to be rolling out the old and bringing in the new. Now, what are the risks involved in this type of deployment? Now, the problem is that just like GT Bank, if there are issues with the new version, they are going to be finding them out when people are already using it. Yeah, when the app is already in front of people, real users are already using it, it's facing real traffic. That's when they'll be finding out the issues that this application has, and this can then lead to a lot of extended outages. Like I said, GT Bank, I wasn't able to get into my app for 2 weeks. This is an app that I use almost every day, and I wasn't able to log in for 2 weeks. A financial application. So that's the risk involved. It's non-trivial to fix this type of issues because a lot of times you don't even know how to roll back to the previous state. You don't have the previous state on another server where you can just switch back to. So, and at the end of the day, it can, even if you don't have a backup and everything, it can lead to a lot of data inconsistencies. It can lead to a lot of client frustration, users frustration, and definitely it can churn users from your application. But if this is so terrible, why do some people do it? There are still some apps that can use this type of deployment because that is merits, especially in terms of infrastructure. You don't have to spend on multiple infrastructures because you are trying to stay redundant. You just wipe your entire app off the current servers and replace it with a new one. So what are the type of applications where you recommend this type of deployment? First, small apps. Yeah, small apps with a few amount of users. Apps that don't even need to be available 24/7. For example, an internal company app. Yeah, you can roll in a new deployment for, let's say there's an HR tool that is being used internally or in a company. You can roll out your deployment at the middle of the night where everybody has gone home. You can remove the old version and replace it with the new version, and even test it a lot, look at the issues and fix it, probably even before people wake up and come back to work. You can also fix it over a weekend. People are not going to be at work in the weekend, so you can fix it around that time. Also, things like personal websites, blogs, most of those are not high traffic, really critical applications. You can always have them down for a few hours and bring them back up when you're done. Also, desktop apps. Yeah, desktop apps. You definitely can take that kind of risk on desktop apps. So this big bang deployment, these are the kind of scenarios where it is it can be applicable. But honestly, I won't really advise this. There should always be a way for you to roll back in case you have an issue in production. So that's the first type of deployment we're looking at, the basic deployment. So the second type of deployment strategy that can be used, which I believe that a bank app like GT Bank should have used, is called the BlueGreen Deployment. Yeah, the BlueGreen Deployment. Now, what happens in this type of deployment strategy is that 2 production environments are maintained. Yeah, 2 are maintained, but 1 is currently live. 1 is currently being served to the public. That's the blue one. It's the one that is currently being served to the public. And then you have another one standby, which is called the green one. Now, the green environment is where you deploy a newer version of the app. Yeah, you deploy a newer version of the app to the green environment. Then you test it thoroughly. You test it with you simulate real life traffic. You do as many integration tests and functional tests that you can do. And once that version is certified to be okay, you just simply switch traffic from the blue version, that's the currently live version, to the green version. Yeah, you currently switch traffic, and that automatically makes the green version to become the blue version. Then the blue version becomes the green version now. So when you want to deploy another version, then the server that you just took traffic away from will now be where you're going to deploy a newer version when it comes out. So you maintain 2 production environments. 1 is currently live. You are deploying the new version to the other environment, which is the green one. And once you fully tested that everything is working fine on this app, you redirect real traffic from the currently live one to the newer version. So that's the strategy. But what are the disadvantages or risks here? Number 1, you have to maintain double infrastructure. Yeah, you have to maintain double similar infrastructure, because these 2 environments are set up to be ready to go live. So if you have 5 databases here, you have 5 databases here. If you have 5 message queues here, you have 5 message queues here. You have you load balance a couple of servers here. You load balance a couple of servers. The same. It has to be the same, because they are both ready to go to production, and that's a lot of money. Yeah, that's going to wake up a lot of costs, because you are maintaining 2 infrastructure when you can just maintain 1. So that is 1. Number 2, because you have to keep the 2 of them in sync, that introduces a lot of complexity. Yeah, you have to make sure you are disciplined enough to make sure that any change that you roll out here is also replicated here. Though these days you can use stuff like Terraform to kind of script your infrastructure, and you make sure that once you run a script for the blue version, you also run it on the green environment. But it also still takes a very strong discipline by the DevOps team to make sure that these 2 environments are always in sync. So that's also a lot of work that's going to come into play. Also a lot of people to manage this stuff. So yeah, in terms of dollars, things can really go up. Also, there are just some issues you cannot simulate until you are in an actual live environment. Remember that the green environment that you are testing to make sure that it's ready for production is still not in a live environment. And you might discover that when you get to a live environment, some new issues will precipitate. Some new issues that you couldn't have simulated, you couldn't have designed or mocked in your dry run is going to occur. So you can't. That's just one thing you have to live with. That's just a risk you have to live with. There are still some issues you might discover when you actually go into production. Now, where is this type of deployment suitable? In what kind of apps is this kind of deployment suitable? Definitely mission critical applications. Yeah, applications that have to be highly available, minimal downtime. For example, fintech apps. Your fintech app, like I said, I feel GT Bank should have used that. Healthcare apps. That's something that you cannot risk with an healthcare app. Also, different SaaS applications like your Gmail, your Google Drive, and stuff like that. And gaming apps also. Gaming apps they are very, very, they don't tolerate any form of glitch or latency. They hate those kind of things. So yeah, these are the kind of apps where you want to have this type of the BlueGreen deployment, so that there will always be a production version of the app running at all times. Now, the next type of deployment strategy that you can employ when deploying your apps to production is called the Canary Deployment. Yeah, the Canary Deployment. It actually has a very interesting story about it that I'm going to talk about later. Now, this type of deployment, it solves one of the problems of the BlueGreen deployment. That's the fact that you can't simulate all the problems you can face in production. So what the Canary Deployment does is that instead of deploying the app to all the users at once, instead of deploying the app to all the users at once, what they do is that they pick a subset of the users, maybe like 20% of the users, and deploy the new version to those users. Yeah, they deploy the new version to a subset of the users. For example, we've seen in WhatsApp, sometimes some people already have the voice note feature, some don't have. For example, one of my WhatsApps, I have 2 WhatsApp accounts on 2 phones. One of them already has the menu down. That's the menu at the bottom of the app. Meanwhile, the other one still has the menu at the top, just like every other one still does. So, and I've had it for a couple of weeks now. I've had that change on the first WhatsApp on a couple of weeks now. So it's deployed to a subset of the user, and they use that to test, number one, the acceptance of that new version, and also to know the type of production issues that can come up, because this one is actually live. The test is being done live with live users, so that if things are not going to work, if people are going to hate it, or if it's going to lead to a lot of issues, lead to a lot of problems, downtime and stuff like that, they just roll it back. They just roll it back to the previous version. So that is what Canary Deployment is all about. There's this story about coal miners using a canary when they want to go into some parts of a mine, and they want to know that there isn't any type of poisonous gas in that side. They just put a canary in a cage, and they push it. They push the cage into that side. So if the canary dies, it means that there's something poisonous there. And if it doesn't die, they know that they all clear. They can go ahead. So that is the strategy. This approach allows for monitoring. Yeah, it allows for monitoring and validating the new version's performance and stability under real-world conditions with actual traffic, which helps in identifying potential issues before a full rollout. And as the confidence increases, as the confidence with the new version increases, it's being rolled out more to other users. So if they have been able to validate that this new version, people actually love it, and it's not causing any issues, it's not leading to any type of client churn and stuff like that, they start to roll it out to others, and before you know it, everybody has it. Just like a lot of features that we've seen on Twitter now that were first tested with some subset of users. Now, what are the risks involved? As beautiful as this is, what is the catch? First, the deployment, the fact that you have to do two types of deployment on the same set of live users, or rather on groups of live users, this introduces a lot of complexity. Yeah, because you have to do a lot of traffic routing and segmentation and stuff like that. So you have to have very experienced people, and you have to make sure that you have the capabilities, the infrastructure to manage that. So that's one thing. Complexity will be introduced into the system. Also, there's always the risk of it being a bad release. Yeah, you release it to a subset of users, they hate it, and they start to leave your application. Now that's a huge loss. You just gambled with some of your users. So that's also a potential risk. Also, there will be additional infrastructure. Yeah, there will be additional infrastructure because the new version is going to be hosted on different servers. Some people use feature flags to kind of like turn on and off features for different type of users, but that is just more complexity if you don't want to spend more on infrastructure. But you might spend more on infrastructure because you need to manage different segments of users, and you need to deploy a whole lot of monitoring to actually get the metrics that will make you make the business decisions whether to continue with that version, to continue with those features or not. So which applications is this suitable for? Which type of applications is this type of things suitable for? Definitely for web applications and services that serve a whole diverse user base, large user base, and also knowing that deploying an unstable release to all users is going to be risky. So you want to test it with it. You want to gamble with that subset of users before you roll it out to everybody. Now, what type of apps are this in the wild? Like I said, Twitter is a very big example. You've seen it happen on Twitter a lot. You've seen it happen on WhatsApp and things like TikTok. Also, they employ this type of strategy a lot when they are trying to release new features into the wild, and also mobile applications. Yeah, and any application that uses a microservice architecture, like Netflix and stuff like that, they are what Canary Deployment is suitable for, and a whole lot of them in the industry use this type of deployment strategy to test new features, to test new releases amongst their users, to make sure that it is stable and it's ready for use. Now, the fourth one we're going to be talking about, and before I talk about that, if you love all this stuff about CI/CD, architecture, engineering, and stuff like that, subscribe to my newsletter. Yeah, I have the link in the description. You can subscribe to my newsletter, and I will be releasing a whole lot of articles. When you write, it's easier to follow something that is written than watching a video like this, because you can take your time, you can read each line, you can read between the lines. So you must subscribe to my newsletter. If you also want to gist with me about this, there's a link in the description for you to book a call with me. You can always do that at your own convenience. So let's talk about the fourth one, and that is the AB deployment. Now, this is not a standard. This is not a standard deployment strategy like Canary, BlueGreen, and the Big Bang deployment or the basic deployment. This is more like something that can be used to assist other types of deployment. But I've just put it here first to make my list look, elaborate, and second because it also can be seen by some other people as a type of deployment on its own. So what happens in an AB deployment? You have two versions of the app, but you can release two new versions of the app at the same time. Two new versions of the app at the same time. Now, you release this to probably 60%, you release this new version to 40%, or you do it 50-50. But most of the time, they are both new versions. But what you're trying to find out is which version do they like the most? Which version is frustrating people the most? Because the version that wins out of these two is going to become the one that we're going to eventually use. Yeah, that is a lot of time is stylistic decisions, UI stuff. Probably for the A version of the app, you put the navigation by the right. The B version of the app, you put the navigation at the top. So you're trying to look at, okay, what is the experience of users with the two versions, and which one do users prefer? And whichever one the users prefer is the one that is going to become the main version at the end of the day. So traffic is split between these versions, allowing a direct comparison of performance, user engagement, and other metrics. So many metrics is collected, important metrics that are critical to the business decisions that need to be made on the application, and whichever version comes on the top is the one that is going to be released. And so, like I said, the strategy is to collect metrics, assess how each version performs against specific goals, such as conversion rate or user retention, and based on the result, the better performing version is chosen for wider release. Yeah, the better performing version is the one that goes out into the wild. Now, what are the risks or demerits of this type of deployment strategy? First, you have to undo different versions of the application. Yeah, that can be more infrastructure. It introduces more complexity and stuff like that. So whenever you're managing two versions of something, it's like having two phones or two cars and stuff like that. It's always extra work for you. Also, it may lead to inconsistent user experiences and it requires significant monitoring. You have to make sure that you instrument it for the exact metrics you want to collect, so that it can lead to the actionable results that you want. It can give you actionable data, and you can be able to take the critical decisions. If you're just measuring wrong things, you're going to make a wrong decision. So that's something that also you have to keep at the back of your mind if you're going to if you're going to be using this deployment strategy. It requires significant monitoring to ensure that the data collected is valid. Yeah, and it has to be collected over a period of time to be able to make any type of informed decision. Also, there is a risk that changes, people might just hate a particular version, and it will lead to a lot of users disliking your application and dropping your application and stuff like that. It might lead to loss of users and loss of business. So you're still gambling. Yeah, you're still gambling. Gambling. You're just gambling with two I'm not a betting guy, but with two odds and stuff like that. You're gambling on two things. And one of them might fail, two of them might succeed, two of them might become stellar, and that's like the best position to be. Anyone you choose is a good idea. So two of them might perform or optimally, but there will always be one that comes on top, and that will be the one you most likely switch to. So which situations is this deployment strategy suitable for? We've given the WhatsApp example. Almost all the ones that we gave in the previous deployment strategy, that's Canary Deployment. Social media apps. Yeah, social media apps are always heavy on this. Some people have this version, some people have that version, and whichever one wins comes on top. Video conferencing apps also, they try out different versions, and most of the time these things are very, very subtle. So it's not like very big change that you're going to see, but they know what they want to measure, they know what they want to ascertain, and at the end of the day, they'll be taking the decisions and making it right. Like one app that is currently facing that issue right now is Slack. Yeah, Slack recently did a huge overhaul to their user interface, and people hated it. People hated it. In fact, I had 3 weeks ago that there's currently a petition running for Slack to revert back to their old interface. Like thousands of developers are signing that petition. Thousands of tech people and people that work with Slack are signing that petition for Slack to revert back. I really pity the UI guys that worked on that. Like that's a good place to be. So e-learning applications also, because you want to make sure that you give students an interface where they can easily learn, easily access their resources, and easily ask questions and stuff like that. So you want to make sure that you critically test any new version that you're bringing out, and if you have two good ideas, you test those good ideas and you see which one people will consider a better idea. So those are the examples of applications that are suitable for A/B deployment. But like I said, A/B deployment, or as some people call it, A/B testing, is not considered a standard strategy by most people. Like other ones, is probably like a supportive strategy to the other ones that we've discussed. So yeah, that's the fourth deployment strategy on our list. So guys, that's all the deployment strategies we are going to be looking at today. We looked at the basic deployment, that's a straightforward deployment. You remove the old, you bring in the new. That's often called big bang. We also looked at BlueGreen deployment, where you have one version currently live and an exact replica where a new version is deployed, and once that new version is tested to be good, traffic is switched from the current version to the new version. We also looked at Canary deployment, where you deploy first to a subset of your users, test whether they are feeling it, and if all is well, you roll it out to everybody. And lastly, we looked at A/B deployment, or what some people call A/B testing, which is not really a standard deployment strategy like others. And what happens in this case is that you have two good ideas of what the new version is to look like. You throw out those two versions in probably is potentially split, probably 60-40 or 50-50, and depending on the one that users like the most, that one eventually comes on top and becomes rolled out as the main version. So that's all deployment strategy we're going to be looking at today. Make sure that you deploy your applications with care, so that you don't frustrate your users, so that users don't have a bad experience, so that your business is not hot. Yep, I remain your bro in tech, FK.